welcome everyone into our top 100 teacher roundtable. We're very lucky in our section to have 4 of our professionals in the Golf Magazine Top 100. So we're excited to have them on here with us. And, again, we're going to make sure that we keep a lively discussion here and get what you all want to get out of this. And again, if you have a question, Sean English, who is my co-chair with the Education Committee, is on. We're going to be monitoring the chat feature. So please type it in there. We'll keep an eye on it, and we'll ask the question with all these people, which is going to be too tough to open up a mic and have people asking the questions out loud. So we'll do it. We'll do it from the chat feature up. So without further ado, since most of us here at least have a whole bunch of snow on the ground, so let's have some fun. Want to welcome in our guests today, just to introduce everyone who's going to be joining us today. First off, in no particular order, Bernie Najar from Kings Valley Golf Club, Trillium Rose from Woodmont Country Club, Mike McGetrick from Robert Trent Jones Golf Club, and Steve Bosdosh from Steve Bosdosh Academy at PB Dye. So welcome all of you for joining us. Thank you all for joining us. Steve, unmute yourself too, so you can jump in there as quick as you can. All right. I want to thank all of you for joining us this morning. So want to go ahead and start off just with a simple, conversation starter. And Steve actually brought this one up. So Steve, I'll start with you. And the way we'll do this too is I might throw it to somebody and say, hey, the next person's going to take it, and then we can kick it over to our other guests as well. So Steve, why don't you take this one? You brought this up, old school versus new school teaching. Thoughts on those terms and how you define your approach and what you are and what you think of that terminology, Steve?
Yeah, thanks. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, so thanks for hosting, guys. One of my mentors back in the mid 80s was Bill Strasbaugh from Columbia Country Club. And to my knowledge, I don't think he owned a video camera. And yet he was one of the all-time great teachers. And so, fast forward today where you have the flight scope and launch monitors and TrackMan and everything, and trying to combine those two, I thought would be an interesting discussion. I'm old enough. I think I started teaching with VHS cassettes. We had these big cameras that you put on the side of your shoulder. And then you had to take the student into the clubhouse and pop those big cassettes into the TV. And now you have your phone, right? And so I thought it would be an interesting discussion to try to, kind of have a blend of old school versus the new school. I mean, the new guys are certainly more equipped. They're better at a younger age. They use terminology that I'm learning, and they're comfortable with it. And, trying to combine that with, before we would try to fix the average member, try to fix his slice. We couldn't show him his swing on video. He didn't really want to see his swing, just fix his slice or fix his shank. And so I thought it would be good to, kind of throw that out there and kind of see where it goes.
Trill, how about you?
I'm unmuting here. I love it. I think when you look at old school, the concept of old school versus new school, when I hear that, I think technology is more of a new school, because that's where we are now. Just like Steve said, we've got access to so much more information. But if you look at the bigger picture from a 10,000 foot view, we're still trying to get people better at golf at the end of the day. And it doesn't necessarily mean it be more complicated. Absolutely not. For most people, don't want it to be complicated, but we have access to a lot more information. So when I think of it, I think of, well, how well are we as coaches able to disseminate data, information, and filter it to get people better? And we may, I often think that sometimes if someone's watching me, sometimes I think, gosh, they must think I'm really, really simple. I may be thinking a lot of things, but it comes out as simple. So I don't know, maybe it looks like it's an old school way, but I feel like I'm a new school teacher because I use a lot of stuff. Anyone want to build on that?
Yeah. Mike McGetrick, you want to chime in on this?
Yes, excuse me. Thank you for having me. Is my video working?
See, Mike. I don't see you on my front page here. No, I don't see any video. I just got your,
Yeah,
you
I
sound
have,
good.
I'm not sure why it's working. So anyway, thanks for having me. I look at old school versus new school. When you look at the era in the decade, you know, every 10 years, you get different uh, old school versus new school. So I wrote down some topics because you have old school, new school in technique on how we teach the full swing, the short game, specialty shots, etc. What Steve was talking about, technology. There's old school versus new school in fitness, in training programs, something Trillium's involved with motor learning. A big one Steve talked about was terminology, marketing, club fitting, equipment, education programs, you know, goes down to even clothing. So I look at old school, new school changing every year, and we're getting better as teachers. Students are getting better as students are learning faster. And it's taken the guesswork out of what we do, and which is making us better teachers. But one of the things I always say is you still have to, when you use technology, I always try to use my eyes and my ears first. I try to guess what they're doing. I try to hear what they're doing as far as impact before I see what they're doing with the technology, because sometimes the technology makes us lazy. And I look at, you know, you ask yourself, what are you as far as, you know, I'm one of the older members now in the section, but you look at old school versus new school. Some areas where I'm still old school, and similar to what Steve was saying, is terminology. You know, the new terminology of using owner deviation, extension, flexion, internal, external, etc. is, I'm still a little bit old school there. And two, when I look at marketing, you can put marketing in there, how we market ourselves, old school versus new school. I'm probably one of the few on here that I have never posted a tweet, a Twitter, a Facebook. I wish I had. And I think it's where I am in my career, but I watch it and I read it all the time and I like it. So just to add to that.
I think you've probably done okay with all the out the social media stuff, Mike. I think we'd agree on that. But Bernie, you want to finish that off, and then we'll kind of kick it around with some other stuff here.
Sure thing. First, like everybody mentioned, it's great to be here with all of you. And during these crazy times, it's fun that we can still gather via Zoom and all the cool stuff that we can do with tech. Old school, new school to me is just what everyone mentioned. And I think, you know, in my case, I got into the business in '94, and using video was a big deal right out of the gates. That differentiated what I did with my players. And a lot of times what I found was, even though you might show them their swing on video, you still had to have the communication skills to message in a way to each player in a way they could learn and apply what you were showing them. So it's no different today. If you have TrackMan or 3D motion technology, there are players that are going to do well with that, or maybe they're better just hearing what you have to say without the tech. So I think you have to be a chameleon. I think you have to adapt to the player, but be smart enough to stay up with technology and use it to your advantage.
That's great. Hey guys, just a quick reminder for some who are just jumped on late. Please make sure you mute your mic so we don't get the background noise, so we can hear everybody's answers clearly. I appreciate it. So as we move in here, and Bernie, I'll start you off.
Teaching seminar.
There you go. Guys, can we make sure we mute your mics, please? Whoever's on there telling everybody what they're doing. Bernie, why don't you start us off with this? We talk about there's been a sort of a change in terms of terminology and usage about what we do, teaching versus coaching. And a lot of people like being called coaches now, teachers. What do you think the difference is between those two things, or are they the same and it's just using a different word?
Yeah, I would say it's important to remember when you teach, you're typically showing somebody something new, different, helping them acquire a skill they don't have. And when you're coaching, you're trying to reinforce what you taught them. And sometimes that could be the same lesson you've given them, but you're fine tuning what you taught. At the same time, I think we're getting into semantics with teaching and coaching sometimes, because it's rare you're going to give a golf lesson where you don't teach something. So you could say you're a coach all day long, and that's great. If that's how you want to market yourself, go for it. At the same time, if you are someone who is constantly just teaching someone brand new information, you might not be developing them as well as you could in terms of them being a player, because a lot of times we're over teaching. We're giving them our students too much information. We're giving them too many ways to do something they haven't quite even figured out how to do at a however you want to call it, an entry level situation. So I think it's easy to overteach, and at the same time, I think it's easy to underteach. You can get someone who you don't want to get technical with because they act like they don't want technical information, but they really need technique to be good at golf. And conversely, you're going to get players that come to you that love information. They want to learn more things, but that might not be the best thing for their player development. So you got to wear a lot of hats when you teach and coach. And I think you can interchange them as you see fit for the player.
Trill, you want to tackle that one?
Yeah, Bernie, I love your answer on that. I agree with all of that. You know, the Canadians have, are there any Canadians on this? Canadians have a pretty defined perspective on coaching and teaching, and it falls right in line with what you said, Bernie. You know, teachers tend to have more diagnostic roles where you're giving somebody information that's new, and you are potentially constructing a very different concept in someone's mind where they need to go or what they need to do. Whereas coaching, I think you probably have to have a little bit of that as well. But coaching tends to be more reinforcing what someone may already know, but they need some guidance, and they need corrective feedback, or they need an environment where they can continue to build on something they know, but they may need that time to get through and make that movement. And that's where I think we as golf professionals need to spend a lot of time. We probably don't do enough to create environments for our students to work on what they know they need to do. Like, how many people do you work on? They know what their issues are, but they can't tend to get out of them. Right? They know they come over the top. Okay, that's not new, but they need to figure out how to get out of that. And that's where we've got to put on, you know, maybe a different approach where, okay, it doesn't help you to know that the club is coming over the top, but where exactly are you going wrong? We can help people have feels for that and give people drills. I mean, is that coaching or is it teaching? I don't know. It's kind of blurry for me too.
So both great answers. Steve Bosdosh, I want to, and then I'll throw to you, Mike. And I might kick back to you all on this, but just a different question too here, because this was a question that a fellow teacher asked and wanted an answer to, and I think everybody would enjoy this. Steve, if you had somebody who's trying to break through a landmark in terms of score, we'll talk about breaking 90 because that's a pretty big one for a lot of people. What would a practice program or approach look like for somebody like that? I know that's sort of a pretty individual question, but what would that look like in your hands, trying to help an adult or a junior? And obviously that could be different, try to break 90.
No, Mark, I think that's a great question, you know, and whatever the score barrier is, or it's, you know, everybody's got their own barriers, right? Whether you're trying to break 100, break 90, break 80, break par for the first time, or compete, you know, in more national stuff. But, you know, our average member, if they break 90, they're happy, right? You know, they've got an 18 to 20 handicap. And, you know, my opinion with that barrier is if we can teach or coach them to putt better, chip better, pitch the ball better, and hit sand shots better. So if you stayed inside, let's just say 30 yards from the green, and you made them a little more proficient, I think that's kind of the low-hanging fruit, right? That's the simplest way to make people better, especially in that, you know, that handicap category. But, you know, when I was jotting down some notes, you know, our average member, I don't know, maybe they're playing 1 to 1.5 times a week. you know, if I could get that person to spend maybe two, let's say 45-minute or 1 hour sessions, a Tuesday and a Friday, and it was strictly, and I broke it down specifically to lag putting and then chipping and pitching. And if we could get them to spend, you know, 45 minutes to an hour twice a week working on that stuff, you know, with, as Trill said, with some feedback stations, I think it's a no-brainer to get people under 90 down.
Mike McGetrick, how about you?
Yeah, one of the questions I always ask an individual is what their goal is. And let's say their goal is to break 90. And then I try to determine, is it realistic or unrealistic? Or if they really want to break 90, do they understand what it is they have to do? So I would tell that person there's 5 areas. You have putting, chipping, pitching, bunker play, full swing. And then in each one of those areas, you have your specialty shots and etc. And I'll usually tell if somebody's shooting 90 or higher, I will talk to them and ask them, I'll say, do you think you can get 1 or 2 shots better around at putting, at chipping, at pitching, at bunker shots, be it greenside and fairway, hit 1 or 2 more fairways, 1 or 2 more greens? And they will always say yes. So when you look at it, it becomes balance. You know, how do I get each part of their game a little better where they get 1 or 2 shots better, and then they're shooting in the mid 80s to the low 80s. So what I try to do is improve on each area with that individual, give them a practice program so they can do some type of practice to get better at that skill set. And then at the end of the day, they become a better golfer. But they have to understand what it takes, the ingredients to become a better golfer to shoot to break 90.
So within helping them achieve that goal is sort of another question here. And maybe Trill, I'll start with you on this one. And there's this discussion about using teaching technique versus skill-based learning. You know, hit the club face here, hit this part of the ground, hit here, hit there, hit the toe, hit the heel, that kind of stuff versus getting into technique. What are your thoughts? And I think this is one that all 4 of you need to answer. Thoughts on using one of those versus the other and sort of balancing the amount of technical info versus task-based achievements. Trill, you want to start us?
Yeah, I wish there were an easy answer and a formula that everyone could just use, because then this would be really simple. Unfortunately, it's not simple, and we're humans and our brain's complex. And there are, so the answer, I mean, the very quick answer is you need both, and you need to use them. You need to gauge who's in front of you and what they need at the time. So here's the troubling thing. There's a ton of research, scientific research, that suggests the external cues are more effective. The, you know, hit the toe, or as opposed to move your arms closer. In other words, do this instead of how to do it. So an internal cue might be telling someone exactly how to, okay, I need your trail arm to fold versus I need your shaft to flatten, or whatever it is, as an example. Now, here's the thing. There was one very interesting study, and I always talk about this because I think it's a good one for golf, that the level of player, so if you have a beginner, might require you to tell them what to do, as opposed to a more advanced player doesn't need to be told what to do. They may need to have a feel. They may need to say, I need that ball to go higher. They already know, they already have the skills to be able to get the ball higher. They already have their way to do it. They've got some built in. Whereas a real novice might need some more direction and some more cues, particularly in a golf swing, because golf swing is so complicated with so many things and so many moving parts. So, you know, I'm always conscious of this, and I think it's a really good thing for all of us to be conscious of it too. What am I giving somebody, and how well are they receiving it, and maybe what do they need instead? And sometimes I even hit them with both. I'd say, let's get that ball started to the right. Let's see that ball start right. And then if, you know, give them a couple chances, and then say, all right, well, your face is really shutting down. So we need that face to be pointing to the right. Let's take a look at video and see what might be causing that. And then, lo and behold, you can see maybe some collapsing through the arms and wrists, for example. You know, so I think you can use both. And I always like to start with the external and see if, particularly with a good athlete, let's see how that works first. and then let's go to the more technical.
No, that's a great answer, Trill. Before I throw it to the next person, just real quick, I just want to remind everyone two things. Sorry to keep harping on the mic thing. And also, we have 83 people on the call, but only 53 of you have put your PGA numbers in. So if you're interested in getting your MSR for it, please make sure you do so and put it in the chat. And most importantly, don't forget, the chat is there also for you to put questions in. I've got stuff here, but I don't have to ask all the questions. I can read your questions. So please make sure you put them in there. Otherwise we'll keep going, but want to make sure you get the most out of this. So Bernie, why don't you take it next on skill versus technique?
So I think the most important thing is look at your player and give them an honest assessment of their skills, because a lot of people don't know what that means. Somebody comes in and they think you're judging them as if they're a tour player or a 10 handicap or a 20 handicap. And you got to know their goals and help them understand to play at the level they want to play at. Here's what's required. And there are different ways to do that. You can watch them hit shots. You can discuss some of their rounds with them. But once you figure out where they are, what they're trying to come in to see you for in terms of guidance, then you have to decide where you're going to coach them from. And I love what Trill said about creating a shot to induce whatever skill you want to work on or something you want to fix. And for example, someone who's too shallow at impact, you might, instead of telling them, hey, you're bottoming out too early, blah, 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 take them over to where they have a downhill lie and say, let me see you hit this shot. How would you hit this shot? Or how would you play this out of a divot? Or, whatever situation you want to give them to induce a better action. And if they're athletic, as Trill pointed out, they'll probably adapt. If they're not, then you got to get more technical with them and go from there. So there's a big difference in who you see on the lesson tee. I know early in my career, I saw a lot of new golfers, a lot of folks that were high handicappers. So I had to give a lot more technical lessons. I get a lot of folks now that are already pretty good. Not to say I don't teach new players or high handicappers, but I find myself going down the road of putting them in situations that produce the swings and feels they need to get their game on the right track. But at the same time, you have to go with technique when it's not there. You have to really help them understand what they need to do, because if you don't have technique, you really don't have skill.
Cool. That's great, Bernie. We got a couple questions actually have come up in the chat. So Steve, I'm going to let you take this first one. Michael Abraham put it in here. Teach a lot of juniors who fire their hips too quickly, causing them to get their trail arm stuck behind them. Any drills or thoughts on how to get them to create a more unified downswing?
Yeah, thanks for that
one a
question.
few times.
I think I'll defer to Mike. I think that's a pretty common issue, right? When you're dealing with juniors and maybe they don't have the core strength, and maybe the club's too big, maybe they're swinging too hard, and it's a great way for them to try to create speed and power. Might be a wrong way, but it's what their body will let them do. But specifically to your question, a couple of things that maybe we might try is to try to have them make some swings flat-footed. We do a lot with take their toes and turn them inward, which is kind of a pigeon-toed setup. And what it does is it firms up the legs and it gives them a feeling of maybe what a better player might feel in their golf swing, how the legs are a little more firmer. Maybe doing full swings, hitting the ball 50% efforts. But I think it's a great question. I think it's a very common issue you see with juniors, especially now when we're dealing with this, the Bryson effect of all this speed, right? Everybody's trying to hit it farther.
Hey, Sean, looks like we lost Mark Russo. If you can take over for him.
Okay, so actually we're just going to move it. You got there, Mark? Okay.
Yeah,
Mark's back.
I'm on my phone here. The world ended for a moment there. I think 12 inches of snow on the local trees here. Steve, I'm sure your answer was amazing, but I heard none of it.
It was
So,
a good
sorry.
answer.
It was a very
Okay.
good answer.
I
Okay.
deferred to Mike.
So yeah, Mike, why don't we move to you and
Yeah.
get your opinion on how to set that up?
Well, if you don't mind, I wanted to go back to skill versus technique, because I think that's
Yeah.
a very intriguing question. And I always look at, number one is identify the task. So the task could be trying to hit a fade, trying to hit the golf ball farther, whatever that task is. And then two, what's the technique to perform that task? So if the four of us were talking today about hitting a fade shot, we might all four talk about it a different way and have a different way of doing it, but we can still all be successful at teaching it, or the players. And then three is the skill development, because I always look at what is their skill level. Is that low, medium, or high? So, a tour player can not only hit a fade, but if you tell him to hit it 155-yard fade, he can do it, where the average golfer might be able to fade it, but have no proximity to the hole. So I always look at those areas first. And then you have to have knowledge and you have to have time. But I'm fascinated what Bernie's done with Kyle Berkshire and what Bryson DeChambeau have done. So if you look at, they're both trying to hit the golf ball farther. So that's their task. And they both have different techniques. They do a lot of things that are similar, but they have different techniques to hit the golf ball farther. So I always tell golfers and teachers, there's more than one way to do things. There's more than one way to swing a golf club. There's more than one way to teach putting, etc. And so that part is fascinating what those two people are doing. And I always say the goal at the end of the day is to convert the technique into a skill. That's what we're trying to do at the end of the day. And it's through repetition, it's through competitive practice, etc.
Oh, that's great.
So
Mike.
Bernie, let's throw it to Bernie for a second, because you have taken, I've gotten to see it, of course, in person a little bit, but you've taken Kyle, who was a good player. There's Kyle Berkshire is a low handicap player, and now he went into being a long drive champion. And talk about the skills that you worked on and how you converted Kyle, and now converting him back to being actually understanding back to being more of a player, we'll say.
Well, that's a lot to answer for you, but I'll do my best. And Mike, I really enjoyed those points, as well as everything Trill and Steve had to say. And I was just thinking back, Steve Bosdosh and Mike McGetrick, I remember the teaching summit we had in the section, around 2008, 7, 8, 9, somewhere in there. And it was always fun to spend time with you. I'm sorry we haven't gathered since then as much, but it's great to be with you today. Going back to your question, Sean, in terms of Kyle Berkshire, I've worked with Kyle since, right around that same time, 2007, 2008. And he was a very gifted junior in terms of hand-eye coordination, athletic skills, and a very good ball striker. I think what a lot of people don't know about Kyle, and I was lucky to spend time with him at that point in his career, is that he was a very late bloomer in terms of growth, and a lot of his peer group hit the ball far. So for him to keep up with the other kids, he really swung at the ball hard. And luckily, I didn't put a governor on his swing. And we joke about that today, that, he thanks me for not restricting his lower body, not keeping his heels down, not doing some of the things. Sorry, I lost a headphone here. Can you guys still hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So when you develop a player like Kyle as a young kid who's trying to keep up with the bigger kids, you got to be careful taking away their power sources. I know we had the question about the lower body being too fast and the arms lagging back too much, or kids getting stuck. One little tip for everyone: if you have a kid with fast lower body action, a stronger grip usually helps. And when I say that, Kyle had a very strong grip. A lot of folks would have looked at his grip, and I had many people come up to me and say, "Why didn't you change his grip?" And what I said was, well, to be fair, the ball's going where we're trying to hit it. So we're not going to mess with it. And he's an incredible shot maker. And what I came to find out later And this is just kind of the evolution of where we are in the business now. A lot of the way you hold the club is going to be based on a lot of factors. We don't have a cookie cutter grip, but whatever grip you have your players with, understand how it works and match it up to their body sequencing. So that's, a big thing with Kyle is figuring out how he's going to, at high speed, or any kid you're developing, how they're going to match the club up. For Kyle, as he evolved with his game, his ball striking got better and better. Where he really struggled was on putting and certain finesse shots around the green. A lot of that has to do with the fact that he's only got 10% hearing. And when I say that, so much of your feedback in golf is from sound. And for Kyle growing up, a lot of times those delicate shots or the shots that you play anywhere around the green, sound's a big feedback source that can accelerate or make your learning difficult. So he's gotten better with that. He's done some stuff to help his hearing. But for a lot of years as a kid, he didn't want to wear hearing aids because he had, just different social factors with that. And so a lot of stuff happens with players you don't even know. And I say this because sometimes people are struggling with things that have nothing to do with their golf swing. And so you got to be sensitive to that. I know I'm going in different directions here, but it's a big piece of Kyle. So we've had a great relationship for a lot of years. I've known him and his family. We are a tight-knit team, and he's involved some great people along the way. He works his butt off, and he is practicing harder than ever. And he's going back to some of the stuff we did in junior golf, as well as when I was training him to get ready for college. And he's starting to learn how to, as crazy as it sounds, swing slower. And, at the same time, it's not slow as in going at a speed where he's not going confidently through the ball, but he's learning how to turn down the power sources. And we're doing some cool stuff now to work on adjusting his ground force patterns for wedge play and for shots around the green. And it's making a big difference. And his putting's gotten tons better thanks to Bryson. Bryson got him using the arm lock putter, which for a lot of folks that like to grip the club firmly, it's a pretty good choice in terms of helping them get through those shots. So we're doing a lot of neat stuff with that. And I think what you have to remember at all times with your players, first of all, get to know them, start to understand how they match up the club to their swing. So if they play with a strong grip and you look at it and the ball's flying well, but the grip looks funny, be careful changing that. At the same time, if it's producing ball flights that aren't great, then you might have a grip intervention. But I'd be careful changing grips. I'd be careful with kids slowing their legs down. That's a big power source, as Steve mentioned. You do have different phases in development with kids. Pay attention to their growth and understand that it's all right for them to be a little wild. Tell their parents it's okay if they hit it far and a little bit out of position. They'll be better players in the long run. And I think Jack Nicklaus was famous for growing up and getting the encouragement to hit it far and go find it. And I think that's something that'll help a lot of our kids play better golf in the future.
So Bernie, you bring something out there before we have a couple questions that maybe we can even put
Mhm.
together. But and I'm anxious to hear this from maybe all of you, because you talked about something that I think is interesting. And that's, you talk about not changing his grip. And I think it sort of goes to something that we all maybe struggle with, how we teach when we first get into it versus what we do once we get experience. Like if he'd have come to you maybe when you first started teaching, do you think you would have changed his grip? Or did experience help you not do that?
I'll tell you what helped me with Kyle. The most important thing I've done, and I'd encourage everyone here to do this, is go watch, it doesn't matter which event, but go to a PGA Tour event and hang out for a couple days and watch everybody tee off on a hole and pay attention to their grips, how they aim. And you're going to see such a spectrum with the best players in the game. Even today, even as instructions evolve, you're always going to see differences. And that was very important to me early in my career. And I was lucky to do that. I caddied for Wayne DeFrancesco in the Kemper Open. I spent a lot of time with Wayne early in my career, and we'd look at tons of different swings. And as most of you know, Wayne, he really liked Ben Hogan's golf swing and had a beautiful golf swing himself. And excellent technique and definitely like to grip a certain way, but we talk about the nuances. And I would tell you and anybody who's trying to get better at teaching, study golf swings. I was lucky with Kyle in a lot of ways because I had that experience early in my career. When I first started out, I knew more than most because I had done some of the stuff I'm telling you about watching swings. But one thing I learned early on from a good friend of mine, Charlie Staples, was there are a lot of ways to hit the golf ball, and pay attention to ball flight and impact before you make changes with people. And that's something that I can't stress enough. And I know today we're all more aware of that than ever.
Steve, and I'd like to kick this around to each of you sort of for a quick answer so we can get to a couple of these questions. But the question I would ask you to answer first, Steve, is what's one thing you teach now that you didn't teach when you started?
That's a great question.
And I didn't prep you with that one prior, so I'm putting you on the spot.
Pretty much everything.
Okay.
I would say pretty much everything. You know, my first couple of years, I taught a lot. And, you know, you learn from making mistakes. You learn from giving a lot of lessons and it doesn't work and you try to figure it out. I think, you know, going back to some of the old school, new school stuff and some of the other stuff we batted around, you know, the equipment has, I think, dictated a change, right? You know, back with the Bellata golf balls with the, specifically to answer your question, you know, we used to teach the ball back, the handle forward, and then you'd go down at it steep and really dig at it hard. But with the soft golf ball, it would spin a lot, right? So it'd come out lower, take a couple bounces and really stop. Now, as the golf balls have gotten harder, and you know, there's still a place for that shot. However, you don't create the same spin because of the hardness of the golf ball. So now, you know, I've had to shift from, oh, put the ball back, weight forward, handle forward, to move the ball more neutral, get the weight more neutral, get the shaft more centered. And now we're using the bounce. So, you know, back when I first started teaching, we never really talked about bounce. Now, that's all you hear, you know, with better players. So specifically with the short game, you know, I think it's changed dramatically, due in part probably, you know, to the technique, the equipment, the golf ball.
Oh, great. That's great. Mike McGetrick, how about you? Something you used to teach that you don't teach anymore, the evolution.
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because I think as we evolve and as years go on, we learn, we get better at everything we do. And I would say, you know, from my younger days of teaching / coaching to where I am today, is teaching the complete game. So really, it used to be a lot of full swing lessons. Now, when I get somebody that comes to me, I'm really into making them a better golfer and teaching all areas of the game, teaching them how to properly train, teaching them, I do a lot of on-course playing lessons. I probably give at least 3, if not 4, 9-hole playing lessons a week. So I'm really about making an individual a better golfer, making them enjoy the game more, shooting lower scores, and showing them what's involved to do that, because it's harder than most people think.
Trill, how about you?
So many things. I think I'm like everybody, always evolving. I love what Mike just said about bringing people on the golf course too, because I think we, especially with, you know, the conversation of coaching and teaching, we become much more full picture helpers, really. And that means seeing what they're doing on the golf course and in looking at what's actually happening in the environment. And that's a totally different thing. You know, I think spending a lot of time with Rob Neal, Dr. Neal, has been the most influential in terms of specific technique improvements that I've had over the years. But I think something I definitely was not working on, what were flighted wedges early on in my teaching, and particularly with lead wrist extension flexion and utilizing torso rotation to create flat spots, as opposed to, you know, any number of other ways, ball position or weight pressure shifts or really a lot of soft wrists. So that's something I definitely have found a lot of success in, especially with people who have a tendency to dig.
No, that's cool. So for all of you, I want to get a couple of these questions in the chat up here as well. And what we'll do here is sort of kick this around and maybe combine this one a little bit. Vicky was asking about video apps that you use on the range. I'm assuming Vicky's asking sort of what you use to film students with and any communication you use via that app. And then Mike's also asking about assessing a player and what questions or evaluations do you give to a new student before you begin. So if we kick it around, just first quickly answer like what your main video analysis is, and then what about evaluating your students before you begin? Do you do any forms? Do you have any process there before you begin with a new golfer? Steve, why don't you start us off?
Yeah, so we use JC Video in my studio, and then we also have this On Form app for the iPads and the cell phones, which are simple. I think most of that stuff does the same thing, right? As far as the questionnaire, when we get new students in, we ask them, right-handed, left-handed, which is a big deal because we have some teachers in our studio that are not comfortable teaching left-handed people. So we have to be careful with that. And we often take that for granted. But, any injuries, how long they've been playing, have they been fit for their equipment? Have they played other sports? How often they play, how often they practice, what their goals are, how good you want to get, how much can you practice now? And we try to gather as much information as we can before they come in, so we save time when they come in. We have that right in front of us.
Awesome. Mike McGetrick, how about you?
So I use Swing Cat and Swing Catalyst and V1 when I'm on the range, Swing Catalyst inside the Learning Center. And to add to Steve with the new student and assessment, like I mentioned earlier, I want to see if their goals are realistic or unrealistic. If somebody comes to you and said, well, I just turned 50, I want to play the Champions Tour someday, and I think I can do it in a year, might not be a realistic goal. So I want to know if their goals are realistic or unrealistic. And then it really depends on the skill level. So how you interview a beginner golfer versus an advanced junior golfer, a collegiate golfer, or a tour player, I will get a little bit more in depth in those areas.
That's great. Bernie, how about you? Software you're using, and then any kind of evaluation form or anything with new players?
So for software, I have Swing Catalyst, JC Video, and I'll use my iPhone a lot on the range, just in regular recording mode. And what I find with the new iPhone Pros, you can wirelessly connect them to a monitor, and it looks incredible. So sometimes just on the tee, I'll just film with the regular phone app, and then texting videos and so forth is pretty easy with your players if you do that. And as far as figuring out in terms of what a player needs from a skills assessment, you got to ask the right questions. I think it comes down to figuring out why they're there. And a lot of new players that are coming to me will reach out. They'll send a web form submission to me. They say, hey, I'd like to come out for a lesson. And then I'll send them back a questionnaire. And I'll find out pretty quickly if they're going to be a good match. And so fortunately, I'm in a place now where I can be a lot more selective on who I take with new students. But whether they're new students or old students, or folks that have taken a few lessons but are getting more interested in getting better in a certain part of the game, you got to know what their goals are, and as Mike pointed out, how realistic those goals are. And I think what Steve mentioned about knowing, if you're in an academy setting, who's going to do better with that player, that's really important. And so regardless of the player in front of you, it's always good to know what they want and deliver them what they want, because sometimes they're coming in for a simple fix, and you might be ready to give them a more complex fit and fix. And, we just have to listen to our customers more, ask the right questions, and then basic ball flight assessments. I think if you have someone in front of you that is struggling to hit the ball, and let's just say that they're on the steep side of the equation, you're going to expose them during a ball flight assessment if you have them on grass. If they're on a mat, it's pretty tough. And, if you're at a driving range, you got to work more off sound, or you can use the technology of a TrackMan or whatever ball flight monitor to show them the attack angle issues, and, video will help, but nothing better than getting on grass or on the golf course and helping them relate to a ball flight miss. And at the same time, whether it's they're trying to hit the ball longer or whatever it might be, if you can get the data, quantify it for them, and organize it so they understand, here's how you're going to get there with them, here's your plan, you're going to help them.
Trill, you want to finish up on that one?
Yeah, sure. I think it's important to ask questions. I think we all agree. Everybody on this Zoom probably agrees. You've got to know who's in front of you, and you've got to ask good questions and find out where people are with their body, what they can do, what they want to do, what they're able to do. I mean, I'll never forget, I had a lesson. This lady was really unresponsive. This was years ago, but she's very unresponsive to pretty much everything. And she was a very beginner, and she wasn't hitting the ball hardly at all. And her grip was a mangled mess. And at one point I asked, what do you really want? And she broke down in tears, and she said, I just want to play with my husband. And so it just cracked open this whole emotional thing for her, where it really didn't have anything to do with the golf lesson. Really, it was much more about something else. And that was a big eye opener for me, that you just don't know who's in front of you and why they're there and what they want. I'll never forget also Martin Hall saying, the question he asks is, why are you here? Because it's so open-ended. It's not, what do you want to do with your game? It's why are you here? Because you might get some more stuff out of that. I had 381 different students in year 2021. That's a lot. So I use Coach Now as I have JC Video in the studio. I use my iPhone. I've got Body Track and TrackMan and KVS, but I use Coach Now in every single lesson. And I keep track of what people are working on that way, so that I can actually go back and I can see where they were, what their progress looks like. And I'll even just throw the phone on a tripod and say, okay, let's just recap so that we're on the same page. What were we doing before? What do you want to do instead? Can you feel it? What are you going to do to practice? I might get in there and do some demos, so they have my swing, the error, and then the correction. And then they get in there, they can see themselves. So anyway, that I think Coach Now has been game changing and game saving for me.
Very good. Sean, you want to take this next one?
Yeah, sure. This is actually coming back. Debbie's got a question more for Bernie, back on the discussion about the putting and short game, and kind of was reference about Kyle's hearing and stuff. But Bernie, if you can I'm going to throw it back to Mike also, because Mike made a comment earlier about listening to the shots and hearing the shots. Bernie, I know from our experience together, you work with your training with Jim Hardy a little bit on hearing shots and how they sound. So how important is it for you in your teaching, Bernie, that you hear the shots, and what are you listening for?
Well, it's a great part of every lesson I give, for me to hear the ball come off the club, because you can hide a lot of things today with the equipment. Some of the clubs sound very similar on a lot of shots, but when you have someone at the high level and you're looking for the needle in the haystack, not to say you can't cue it up on your TrackMan impact point or whatever you might use to look under the hood, but in the field, on the golf course, watching them, if you understand the differences between just a little in the heel, a little bit on the toe, it's really important. And especially for the better player, and especially if you can do that outside of your lab. In the lab, obviously, you're going to see patterns, but I think it's really important as a teacher, as a coach, to understand the sound of impact. Jim Hardy's been a great mentor and friend, And someone that shared this with me, and he learned it from John Jacobs. And these guys can teach with their back to the player and tell you where the ball went. It's pretty amazing. But at the end of the day, if the player starts to understand that, that's equally as important, because then they can start matching up their adjustments instead of worrying about what their swing looks like all the time. I think a lot of people get too caught up in, I've got to swing and look a certain way when I do it. And they're missing some basic things that, Ben Hogan would say, secrets in the dirt. You got to go out there and hit some balls, listen to the shots, feel the impact. And so much of what challenged Kyle early on is he wouldn't have that awareness around the green. Now Kyle can hit. If you look at his golf clubs, whether the clubs he plays today or as a kid, he'd wear out the sweet spot in a nice little dime. So tremendous ability to hit the ball solid. But around the green, there are plenty of shots you got to learn to hit off the toe. Or if you want more spin, you got to learn to hit it low in the face. And those are the micro adjustments at the high level someone athletic and gifted can do, especially if they can hear it and relate to it. So I think it's really important.
Mike, you want to kind of touch a little bit on this?
Sure, right. A couple of things, like what Bernie said. Number one, what we hear as an instructor and what a student hears when they're hitting a golf ball are completely different. So as an instructor, through years of experience, we can hear when somebody hits it high in the face, low in the face, hits it on the toe, hits it on the heel. One thing I try to make students aware of is where they are hitting it on the club face, because most of the time, most golfers don't know. So obviously you can use TrackMan to show contact point, but I use two things. I use face spray a lot with lessons, or a dry erase pen where I'll mark balls so they can learn where they're hitting. And getting back to Bernie made me think of something. Several years ago, I was teaching Kari Webb, and we were at Trump International in West Palm Beach, and we're hitting in the back of the range under a covered shelter. And we were hitting for about, 15 minutes. And Kari says, I can't hit balls under here because I can't hear my golf shots. And I thought that was pretty fascinating to hear a tour player that related the sound of impact to the quality of their shot. So it's important for us as a teacher, and it's also important for the individual.
Great
Very
answer,
good.
Mike. Yeah.
Trill, I'm gonna actually throw it to Trill for a second, because with Trill, your background with your cognitive learning and everything you've worked on, how important do you feel like the hearing is with what you've learned in the learning process?
I just learned something today from Bernie about Kyle. I didn't realize that he had 10% hearing. I thought that's really interesting. So Bernie's had firsthand experience with this. We adapt. I know Jim Estes is here too, works with a lot of people who need some different ways to go about the movement, and our brains adapt. And there's some really interesting things that have happened to humans over the years where part of their brain that was for hearing moved to another spot. So we can change, we can figure things out. I don't know. It's like, how would a blind person golf? You just kind of, you work with what other senses you have, and those become a lot more acute. I use my hearing all the time with golf, and I can hear by sound, like all of you who've listened to 7 zillion golf shots before. You just kind of know what they sound like. Remember when TaylorMade came out? TaylorMade came out with a club. I can't remember. It was the RBZ or something. RB. I'm not a TaylorMade person, but I remember it had a very different sound, and everything sounded different to me. And that was sort of jarring, because I thought it might have been thin. I really had to throw some spray on no, that's actually the sweet sound. Yikes. So I don't have a lot to add in terms of the science on it, other than people adapt and people will work through things. But I certainly use my hearing. So I would have to, I'd have to change a lot if I lost my hearing.
That's cool. Great. Yeah, that's a great question, and a great topic to get into also. As we sort of approach the top of the hour, we did start a few minutes late, so it might push a few minutes past. But what I wanted to do was just sort of finish it up, maybe kick some individual questions around and sort of do a speed round here to get through. to kind of finish up on a positive note here, because we could do this forever, honestly. But we'll start with a question that came up on the board that I want to make sure we get asked. Steve, you can take this one. And again, I might not kick all these to everybody, but how important is the use, Brian Sadler asked us, how important is the use of training aids? And is it important to be careful while using them when teaching beginners? Interesting.
Yeah, I think Trill made a comment, or somebody made a comment earlier about, feedback stations. And, I know Mike Bender's been he's opened my eyes about feedback stations, but if you send somebody away and they don't know when they're doing it correctly or incorrectly, chances are the more they practice, they might get worse. So, I get asked a lot what my favorite training aid is, and it's just basically a cardboard box, a club box. And it's simple, it's effective, it's not threatening. But my studio is filled with all kinds, and we use them every day.
Cool. Trill, I'll ask you this one because I sort of know, I'm imagining what part of your answer is going to be, but we had a question from one of our fellow teachers before about tracking student progress beyond handicap. So how do you measure progress or track student progress outside of handicap?
Love it. I love measuring, love benchmarking. And there's so many different ways you can do it. And depending on the skill level and where somebody wants to go, you could measure, you could set up your own games, and you can say, hey, we've got a 100-yard flag that happens to be right there. Let's see how many out of 10 can you get within, 10 feet or something. That's basically benchmarking. You have the same drill or a variation of the similar drill, and you just keep track. You just keep track of your progress. I found that it's been really helpful to benchmark when somebody either thinks they're not getting better or thinks that they are doing all of the right things and then still not getting better. It's like, okay, well, let's go back to the skill. How well can you actually do the skill? So you think you should be shooting lower scores, but the reality is you still don't have the skill. So we need to build the skill. So benchmarking is actually a great way. You call it testing, just test. You just test how well can someone perform that same skill. Big on it, and obviously you want to pay attention to the areas that are costing people the most strokes. So like Steve was saying, he works on lots of different areas that he hadn't worked on, maybe in the very beginning, 30-yard shots out of the rough, bunker shots, long lag putts. So I don't know. I think sky's the limit. I think golf is really cool because there are just so many ways to capture data and have some numbers, and you can create your own spreadsheets. It doesn't have to be complicated. You could do it with an 8-year-old. It doesn't have to be huge formulas on your Excel spreadsheets. It could just be some simple stuff that you just keep track in your head.
Cool. Awesome. Mike McGetrick, just a quick one from you maybe here. How do you structure your programs, and do you have any experience, because this comes up some different discussions, do you have any experience doing like multi-day golf schools?
Yeah, first off, I apologize for my video not working. I got a haircut yesterday and I don't even get to show it off. I used to do a lot of golf schools. At Robert Trent Jones, I just teach individuals. Golf schools, if you think about and ask yourself, why do you do it? People go to golf schools because they get more hours at a lesser price. Teachers do it to make more money. My teaching right now is more one-on-one. So if you look at the advanced golfer teaching a tour player or an advanced collegiate player, they're not going to really go to a golf school. They want the one-on-one. So I don't do it at Robert Trent Jones. The only time I'll do group instruction if it's more in a corporate environment, and I haven't done a lot because I've only been there 2 years as far as programming because of COVID. But in Houston, I used to do a supervised practice program where I'd bring individuals that I would teach and supervise that practice. Now, another area where I like golf schools as a teacher, so if I am a head of a golf school and I have 3 assistants teaching with me, it's a great way for me to supervise their teaching and to get better. So there's some pluses and minuses to it.
Awesome. That's great. All right, so we'll probably have to start wrapping it up here. So I'm gonna start with Bernie, and we'll circle back to each of the three of you. So Bernie, you'll start us off on this one, because again, we could keep going here. But who are you watching, or what are you learning new right now?
Well, that's a great question. I just upgraded my swing catalyst to the dual plate. So I'm learning a lot about contributions on each side of the body, and generally trying to watch and learn stuff not only in golf but outside of golf. So the answer to your question is I'm an open book. I'm always listening, watching, doing different things, but I'm trying at all times to become a better coach. I'm trying to make sure I'm fresh. I'm trying to make sure that physically I'm in the best shape I can be in, because I find that allows me to demonstrate what I'm teaching better. And most importantly, gives me the endurance to be on lesson tee. And for those of you who are getting into teaching and thinking about making this your full-time gig, or if you're already a full-time teacher, don't underestimate the importance of being in shape. It is a physical job, and mentally to teach 8-10 hours a day or whatever you're doing, over the long haul, you need some endurance and you need some tactics to help you do it. So I'm always looking for different ways. Sometimes I'm learning about nutrition because I'm trying to figure out the best things to eat and drink so that I can keep my focus and give my students the best lesson I can give them.
Awesome, Bernie. Yeah, amen to that. Steve, how about you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I'm learning to simplify things, even though we've got, a nice building and all this TrackMan and video and all that stuff. A lot of times you can fix maybe 2 or 3 swing errors with one simple thought. And so I keep trying to simplify my methodology and the way that I teach. And secondly, I think Bernie can attest to this. I have been steep my whole life, and I swear to you, I'm going to shallow it out before I die. I am going to learn to shallow out my swing before I go into the big divot. I'm still working on that though.
Steve, let me know if you get that figured out. Please let me know.
I think I do sometimes, and I go out and it's like, oh my gosh.
Steve, you might need to get on Debbie's lesson book.
Yeah.
Mike McGetrick, how about you? What are you learning?
You know what? I'm learning a little of everything. I try to, every morning, I try to listen to somebody online. Sometimes I might just pick a topic, and it might be the movement of the lower body on the downswing, for example, and just start listening to what other people talk about. So I try to get away from politics, which I've done the last 2 years. So I've decided to listen to podcasts on the way to work and coming home from work. So I listen to a lot of different podcasts. So I try to get better every day at a lot of different areas. I went away for Christmas and I reread the Talent Code, and it was good to do that. So I just do not one thing, but a lot of little things.
That's cool. Trill?
I love
Okay.
listening. I wish we could go through the whole 85 people and hear what everyone's doing, because I love getting ideas. I am one technical thing and one more business thing. I have been trying to solve for managing my emails and admin in a better, faster way. I feel like the one-man band thing is good, but 2021 was really, really busy for all of us, which is a great thing. But there's got to be a better way. I just dropped so many balls with emails this year. I got to figure that out. So I've been exploring a virtual assistant. For not that much money, you can have someone help with admin. So if that works out, I'll let everybody know. This could be a secret weapon. And then the other thing is skiing. Everyone probably sees I love skiing. I love the snow. I'm from Vermont. So I've been interested in watching this other educational online teachers and how they do it and what their what that exchange looks like, to get some ideas for how we can, and I can possibly have that outlet too, without taking too much time. So online lessons basically via a different sport and as the student.
That's cool. Yeah, I think we can all agree that time management, this is something Trill and I have talked about independently on our own, is a big thing for all of us. And I'll take the opportunity here to say it again, because I say it in all of our section stuff here too, is also taking care of mental health. And using that as a segue, before we say goodbye on all this and thank our presenters, I just want to get everyone, while you're on here, we have more of these events coming up. The next 2 Tuesdays, the 11th and 18th, we are having PGA National Education do the specialization training for teaching and coaching. You have to attend both to get credit for it, but it's a huge jumpstart. Once you get past it and you spend the time with us, it's free, by the way. And once you do that, then you only have like 10 credits and your capstone, and you got to pay your money then, and you're specialized, and you're well on your way to becoming certified master professional. So hopefully you can join us for that. You do not have to be in our section for that. You just have to be a PGA member, because it's all virtual. So you just have to be a member. So that's the 11th and 18th. And then February 7th, we're hosting Ian Highfield game leg training. Many of you know Ian. Ian's a talented guy. He's going to help us figure out how to help people get better, practice games, transference of all the stuff we try and teach them. And then they come back and say, I can't take it to the course. He's going to help us figure that out. And then to the point about mental health, Sean was able to secure a doctor from Johns Hopkins, who's, Hopkins is in our area here, one of the premier facilities. Dr. Erica Chapini. Did I pronounce it right, Sean? Was I close?
I hope so.
Okay.
Yeah, I know her as Dr. Erica. So
okay, she's a fellow Italian, so I think I got it right. But so we have those coming up for you. We'll take a break. That next week, the 21st, we're going to try and fill that in as well. So keep an eye out on social media, Mid-Atlantic PGA, my page, everybody's page. We'll look for it, and then we'll try and put some more events in early March, and we hope you all will join us for that. So I want to say thank you to our 4 top 100 teachers for spending time with us. Steve, Trill, Mike, Bernie, thank you all very much. We really appreciate it. Hope everybody has a safe, great rest of the day, and we'll look forward to seeing all of you on the 11th and 18th for specialization training.